everybody. Woo. Thank you all for coming. This is my first time at MinneBar. I had no idea I was going to have like 50 people come to my talk. This is a high bar, I guess. My name is Bill Bushy. I'm the technology coordinator at edemocracy.org, which is a nonprofit that promotes dialogue amongst communities and neighborhoods using online tools. I am also a co-founder of Open Twin Cities, which is a Code for America group, Code for America brigade. We're trying to improve civic technology in the Twin Cities. And hopefully in the next half hour, I can answer some questions for you. What exactly are these things, these words that are coming out of my mouth? What is civic hacking and open data? What do we mean when we say those things? And then, is this something that's only happening in the Twin Cities? No, it's not. There's actually a lot of really cool stuff happening around the country. And then finally, well, what is happening in the Twin Cities? I believe so. I was told it might not come through the AV system, but it is coming through to the camera, so I will speak up. Okay, so the question, what do we mean when we say civic hacking? For the record, we are not hacking into government servers. If that's what you came for, yeah. That's what I thought, Daniel, you're a shady guy. So let's step back for a second to the idea of basically applying modern computer technology to government. This actually isn't really a revolutionary idea. It's pretty much the same thing that any organization of sufficient size, public or private, goes through. Since the 80s, everybody's been saying, hey, we have this great new computer technology, we have the internet, we should apply it to our processes to make them more efficient. We should apply it to our consumer engagement or our users to make the process of interacting with us better. And we should also use it to just enable new things that the organization, be it a government, private company, couldn't do before. So to this idea of just applying technology to government, we add an open source / hacker ethic. So when I say open source, I don't just mean we go around advocating that governments should use open source technology. We're not sitting here saying, hey, Hennepin County, you should put Linux on everything. That said, hey, that would be kind of nice. What I actually mean is the open source ethic is basically, this thing I'm using, I use it a lot. I'm a capable person, I could fix it, and you know what? I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make it better. I see how it could be better, I'm going to make it better. It's about empowering citizens to be involved in the process of creating the technology they use. It's basically about democratizing one of the main avenues through which everyday citizens interact with the government. When you lower the bar to who can be involved in creating that technology to be virtually anybody in the metro area who has an idea, has skills, boy, you're gonna get a whole lot more ideas and a whole lot more implementation, and that means a whole lot of experimentation. So that's something we're very much about also. Anybody who has an idea or an implementation, they're going to learn things through that process. They're gonna learn what worked, what didn't work, and the whole community, not just the physical metro, Twin Cities metro community, but also the community of people who build civic tools, who build any tool, will learn from that. So that's civic data. That's civic hacking. What is open data? Open data is kind of like the yin to the civic hacking yang. They are actually distinct ideas, but they are so much more powerful if they both exist. And civic hacking in particular, I think is difficult to do without a basis of open data. So a lot of civic hacking groups will also be pushing for more data, either actually advocating that the particular government open up more data, or somehow hosting data that the organization has acquired. What open data actually is in my mind, it comes down to 4 levels. You can go and Google open data, and you will see various definitions. But this is just kind of how I see it. The first is the most basic: do I have the right as a citizen to get data from the government? This manifests itself mostly through Freedom of Information Act at the federal level. I think the vast majority of states have a state version. In Minnesota, it's Chapter 13, the Data Practices Act. This is the legislation that basically mandates how I, as a citizen, can go to a city, a state, a county agency and request data. This is also the legislation that controls what kind of data I can access and any requirements. Do I have to pay for it? How long should I expect to wait? So that's level 1. Level 2, to that payment and time requirement. This gets to what I call equitable access. I'm a 27-year-old recent graduate. I have virtually no resources. So if I want to do something cool, if I want to get data from a city or a state government, and it turns out that it's going to cost $10,000 for me to get that data set, that's prohibitive for me. I might as well not even have the legal right to ask. Any large company, that's not a barrier at all. Okay, $10,000 to Target, for example. By the way, I don't hate Target, just an example. Nothing to them. So equitable access is basically, I have the right to access it, and I should expect that if there's a cost, it's very reasonable. And expectation of time is very similar. If it's going to be 6 months for me, that might be prohibitive. 6 months for a larger company with a longer, with like a 5-year plan, that's not as prohibitive. The third is, what do you get when you get this data? Some governments are notorious for just putting out PDFs or print copies. You get like a big stack of print copies. At this point, I at least have the data, so I could put in the effort to do things. The question now is, as an application developer, I need the data to be in some kind of structured format. Even if it's just a CSV file, I at least can run through that. So if I'm not getting it in some kind of structured format, I have to spend the time converting it. And in this day and age, we kind of expect that this data is already stored structurally. I should be able to get the structured format. And then finally, as close as reasonably acceptable, I should be getting real-time access. This translates to basically there should be APIs. There will be some cases where the API maybe isn't as important for kind of information that doesn't change, but something like, let's say the location of buses in the Metro Transit system, that changes every minute. It'd be fantastic if there were an API I could hit, or my application could hit, to get up-to-the-minute information. So what's happening around the country? The civic hacking thing has kind of taken off in the last, I'd say, 5 years. So first off, there's the city camp. This is a non-conference. Hey, since you're all here, I don't have to explain to you what a non-conference is. But it's a non-conference focused on discussing the intersection of community, government, and technology. So these city camps, the first one was in Chicago 3 years ago. They've since been held in 25 cities, I believe. And they always get people from state governments. They get community leaders, neighborhood block club leaders, developers, designers. You just get them all in a room, and you find out what interesting topics will come up. A little plug for my employer. eDemocracy is the fiscal agent for the International City Camp Umbrella Group, which helps to coordinate all these individual city camps, exchange information, help with fundraising, and the executive director, Steve Cliff, over here has been just a big proponent of this since the beginning. So there's this other organization called Code for America. How many of you have heard of Code for America? Okay, about a quarter. This is a nonprofit that started 4 years ago out in San Francisco, and it basically serves as kind of a national focal point for anybody engaged in civic hacking. Like City Camp, like the umbrella City Camp organization, it provides a network for sharing information, sharing experience. It also provides these 4 programs, all of which are really built on the idea that there needs to be connections between certain groups of people. So the fellowship program connects talented young developers with city governments. The brigade program connects grassroots people who basically want to just start doing this on their own with each other, with local civic leaders and community leaders. The peer network connects cities with each other so that they can learn from each other, talk about what worked and what didn't work. And then finally, the accelerator. With all this experimentation, it's just like any other entrepreneurial venture. Eventually, you'll end up with something that could be a sustainable business. And so the accelerator works to connect the project with mentorship and funding and everything else that will help it get off the ground. So quite a few projects have come out of this, and I'll just go over 3 pretty quickly. The first is this site called Adopt a Hydrant. This came out of Boston. This is actually one of the things that came out of the fellowship program the first year it was run. The fellows and the city of Boston came up with this idea that, hey, it snows and gets really icy during winter and all the fire hydrants get buried. And it's life-threatening when a firefighter has to spend 5 or 10 minutes digging out the fire hydrant while a house is burning. So let's experiment with creating a site that motivates and also helps people in the neighborhoods to find the fire hydrants that are nearby and basically commit to saying, when it snows, I'm going to shovel that out. It also sends an email when it snows. Of course, we all know when it snowed, but it's nice to be told, oh yeah, it snowed. By the way, you might want to go clear off that fire hydrant. Another interesting example of this civic hacking, and also kind of the open source philosophy I talked about earlier, is Open 311. 311 is just, most cities have some kind of 311 where you can contact the city for non-emergency things, finding out where the nearest library is, or letting them know that there's a pothole in front of your house. And it's also starting to creep into communications, websites and whatnot. So a lot of cities now also have like a 311 website. A lot of cities are basically transmitting the same thing to and from their citizens. So somebody said, hey, we should come up with a standard on how this is transmitted. That's what Open 311 is. It's just a standard for transmitting these messages. I believe 30 or 32 cities worldwide have implemented the Open 311 standard. So what's great about that is, let's say New York City. If I live in New York, they use the Open 311 standard. I create applications such as C-Click-Fix. Oh, it works in New York, but now it works in those 31 other cities. And in the case of C-Click-Fix, this is an example of building an application on the open protocol. It's the pothole example I mentioned earlier. It's basically that. It's a mobile app where I can take a picture of a pothole, tag it with the GPS on my phone, let the city know it's there. And finally, all that open data stuff I talked about earlier and how the civic hacking organizations might end up with data, well, we have to figure out how to actually host it online. Because in almost every case, we do want to host it online once we've gone through the pain of acquiring it. So there's this open source project called CCAN, which is basically a repository for hosting data sets that are intended, they're mostly government-produced data sets that are intended to be published. CCAN has actually gotten a lot of support recently, and it's also been used in a lot of governments, or by a lot of governments. Data.gov at the federal level is based on CCAN. CCAN does take some resources to put up, so in a way, kind of like Git, maybe if you don't want to bother running your own repository, you can use the Data Hub, which is just like a giant free-to-everybody installation of CCAN. And then there's also this fork called dcan. CCAN is a Python application. dcan is a re-implementation in Drupal for various, there are various advantages to Drupal. A lot of governments are also embracing Drupal as their CMS. And that, like I said, that's just three examples. There are currently 27 projects up on the Code for America site. Some for helping you find or map foreclosed homes, some for helping to communicate information to the city. There's a lot going on. So what's happening here in Minnesota, and especially in the Twin Cities? Well, Open Twin Cities is happening. Open Twin Cities, as I said in the beginning, is a brigade. We're working to build a network of people in the Twin Cities, of government officials across the cities, across the metro, the counties, and the state, so we can all get together and talk. Designers, developers, people who like to build things, and community organizers, basically everybody. Anybody and everybody. If you live in the city, we want you to come. The cities. It's also has a lot of support from eDemocracy. Once again, they are a fiscal agent, and both eDemocracy and Code for America provide us with just a lot of experience and sage advice.
That means you're old, is what you're saying?
Your experience, you've gone through it. So very quickly, Open Twin Cities said, hey, we get colder and we get more snow than Boston, so we should probably do this adopt a hydrant thing. So that was like the first thing that we did, is we put up a Twin Cities version of Adopt a Hydrant. We actually went to the fire departments of Minneapolis and St. Paul and got the data on where all the hydrants are and geolocated it all and put it up. This picture you see is from a story from Minn Post, where they were covering a group of third graders called the Hoppity Hats. I love this. This is a group of third graders that basically decided to undertake a class project on community service based on Adopt a Hydrant. So I said that probably our biggest goal with Open Twin Cities is building the network of people. So the biggest thing we do is we work on events as a catalyst for community building. We have monthly meetups, which are basically open lab time. If you have an idea for some application for your city, county, whatever, and it could be from a just vague sense of what the idea is to, you have like architectural layout and everything, well, just come. If you're looking for a space to work on it, even just dedicated time, that can be a big help. Just having a time that you know that there will be 3 or 4 hours of people working on similar things, or bounce ideas off each other. If you want to just work on something, come. At the end of February, we held what we believe to be the first Civic Hackathon in the Twin Cities, and most likely all of Minnesota. This was part of the International Open Data Day initiative, and also part of Code for America's Code Across America. So there are cities all over the world holding hackathons that day. Since we're such a new organization, we have no money. We're all volunteer, so this was very whipped up very quickly. We duct taped a router to the wall. But out of a fairly minimal amount of planning and resources, we ended up with this great event that had 20 people that stuck around all day, worked on 4 great applications. 2 were based on visualizing and mapping crime data from the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. 1 was based on curating a list of over 900 data sets from governments in the Twin Cities, including the state, Met Council. And then finally, an effort to kind of cleanse some data that concerned locations that provide access to the internet and training. Oh, and then to top it all off, a candidate for mayor of Minneapolis showed up at the very end and actually sat and listened as each team presented what they had done and just got to learn what civic hacking is and what we would love to see the city do to support it.
Which one?
I will not say. It's also important to point out Open Twin Cities is a nonpartisan organization. So they're coming up towards the end of spring. There are a couple of big hackathons we're helping or planning. The first is this Visualizing Neighborhoods hackathon. And I love this. To me, this is proof that Minnesota is ready for this, because the city of Minneapolis and the University of Minnesota both decided to start planning this, and then contacted Open Twin Cities and said, can you help? And we're like, yeah, we'll try. So it's going to be a hackathon focused on creating visualizations, maps that help neighborhood groups, district councils, just with whatever interests them, whatever problems they're trying to tackle. It will be a great event. Unfortunately, you probably can't go because the registration filled up. There's over 100 people. There's a wait list. Fortunately, a week later, there's another hackathon. So the White House, a couple of months ago, announced this National Day of Civic Hacking. It's actually a bit of a misnomer since it's a 2-day event.
You mean the federal White House? Or
Yes. I mean,
what individual? Is this the press secretary?
you know, actually, I'm not sure.
It was the White House Office of Science and Technology, and there's going to be over 50 events around the country.
The White House Office of Science and Technology.
And NASA and Census.
And you got NASA and Census. And
Colin here is a great point person on a lot of this stuff, so talk to Colin afterwards.
yes. So actually, Colin was one of the people that brought it up. So Open Twin Cities, with the help of DevJam, are going to put on the Minnesota version of this event. Like I said, it'll be 2 days. It'll be at DevJam Studios. They're providing food. We're in the middle of connecting with state, cities, counties, and Met Council to have representatives there. We want this to be an opportunity to really shine a light on what the governments are doing, and then also as an opportunity for people to just work on it and, relay their experience. Like, hey.
How aggressive do you get? Because there's WikiLeaks, which really wants to shine a light on what government is doing, and expose certain information so that people can be more informed, so that government corruption can. What's your take on government corruption, and have you exposed any government corruption?
No to the latter. We've only been around for 6 months.
But you know government corruption's real.
Yeah. So for us, the thing with Minnesota is it lags behind a lot of other states. So for us, it's almost like a low-hanging fruit problem, that there are just things either through the Data Practices Act or the lack of APIs and structured data where we know this data is available. It needs to be available in better ways. Some of that does actually point directly to transparency. The city of Minneapolis received like a D- rating from the Sunlight Foundation for the information related to budgeting. So it's definitely something we want to work on.